Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a returning guest. We have Mike Nicholsen. So it's Mike Nico on Instagram. Mike, thanks a million for jumping on. Do you want to introduce yourself? I know you did one before, but just a quick introduction for those who haven't listened.
Just in case things have changed in the last couple of months.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm a performance nutritionist, master's degree in sports nutrition. Since we actually last came on, I've had a paper published by the American College of Medical Science and been asked to go and speak at their annual general conference in San Diego, which is cool.
That's unbelievable. Jeez, well done, mate. That's excellent. And I think since we talked as well, you may have got accepted for your PhD, or was that?
My PhD proposal has been accepted at 3 different universities, 2 in America, 1 in Australia. Now it's just, luckily they deferred, all 3 colleges have decided to have agreed to defer them, which means I can just kind of pick it up when I want.
Excellent. Jeez, well done, man. Fair play. That's top class. So I suppose what we'll do first, before we even jump into that, is I might get you just to talk a small bit on what you'll be talking about in San Diego.
Well, it was just the last paper that I wrote was the effects of creatine on peak muscle torque and body composition. So it was that. So we submitted that to them. We submitted the abstract to them, and they accepted the abstract, and they've asked for the paper. So we submitted the paper. Then they're going to publish that, and then they've asked us to go and speak through the paper and just talk about that, really.
Excellent. Okay, nice. San Diego's unbelievable too.
Yeah,
I love it. Yeah, but okay. So what we are going to do today is that during the week, I basically popped in we had obviously planned this for a couple of weeks, but I popped in a question into the client group, and I asked people what were they looking for. Basically, I said I had a performance nutritionist on. He'd been on before. A lot of them had listened to the last podcast, and if you haven't, guys, make sure to go back and check it out. And I just said, is there anything you'd like to know, or ask me while he's on? And we were going to talk a small bit about hydration, but we'll probably do that again at another time, because there's a few very good questions have come through here. And I'd love to just run through those nice and quick so people have a good idea of what they can do going into the season this year. So if that's all right with you, we'll start and we'll go through them, and you can take as much time as you want on any question. So the first question that came in, we'll start off with, I'd love a recommendation about what good nutrition timing would look like for a 9-to-5 job for men or women.
Okay, so nutrition timing is all about your goal, depending on whether it's sport performance or body composition, for a start. Now, we're going to presume that these are sporting performance goals, as most of your listeners are top class athletes. Exactly. So we're going to so sporting performance. So what we're trying to do is our nutrition on sporting performance is based around your training times. So what we have to look for this individual is what times do they train, and then we need to base their carbohydrates pre-workout and post-workout, and maybe slightly intra-workout as well, depending on how long the session is. If the session's more than 40 minutes, then we're probably going to have to get some maybe a fructose and glucose mix between 60 and 40%, which would be ideal, but some kind of carbohydrates with intra-workout. But yeah, so meal timing with performance nutrition is going to be based around your training. So we're going to make sure that we're hitting our pre-workout goals. So as we spoke about last time, we kind of split it up into 2 phases, pre-workout, into 2 phases, post-workout. So you've got 2 hours before, we're trying to get our kind of bigger carbohydrate actual meal in there with maybe a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 protein to carbohydrate ratio. And then 15 minutes before is when we're just going to top up our simple carbohydrates with a simple carbohydrate that's going to really spike that blood sugar, and then in turn spike your insulin, which is going to then regulate the blood sugar and help flood any glycogen into the muscles. And then obviously intra-workout, we just spoke about that. Post-workout, again, we're going to do 2 meals again. So we're going to do one within 15 minutes post-workout, and that's going to be, again, 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to proteins. A simple carbohydrate that's going to spike your insulin, which is then going to unlock the muscles and allow us to flush all that glycogen into the muscles to get a head start on recovery. And then obviously the protein, which is going to get kickstart muscle protein synthesis, which is what we're trying to do, which is help our muscles grow bigger and stronger.
Okay. And to kind of look at it, I suppose, to dig into it a small bit more, and I want to ask about food examples of just basic things. Nothing, I know we don't want to go for a meal plan or anything like that, but in general, what type of foods are you looking at for each of those?
That's perfect. That's super important, because what we always say to our athletes is your 2 hours before and your 2 hours after are going to be more complex carbohydrates and protein sources. So we're looking at actually more meals here. So like sweet potato, chicken, those kind of meals, rice, whatever you want, whatever kind of carbohydrate source you want and whatever protein source you want. But it's not particularly important because they don't need to be fast digesting or fast acting, because they're big time frames either side of it.
Yeah.
Now the meals 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after, you ain't eating 15 minutes before. It's got to be something like a liquid, because it's got to be something that your body can digest quickly. So the most important thing with sports nutrition on competition day, don't change anything. Don't try something that you've never tried before, because that's just a recipe for disaster. We don't want to do that. So 15 minutes before, it's something that you can digest quickly. If you're someone super lucky and you can digest, say, fruit super quickly, you might want to take a little bit of fruit on, like watermelon is something that a few of my clients take on because it's 80% water. Yeah. So that's gets a head start on hydration as well. But again, it's something that's not going to sit on your stomach quickly, and something that's going to spike that blood sugar. So something simple, sports drinks. There's a massive market out there for sports drinks for a reason, because they kind of work as long as you use them as a tool, and we're not just sitting there drinking them throughout the day when we don't need them.
Okay.
And then post-workout, 15 minutes post-workout. This is, in my opinion, super important, because what we're trying to do now is we need to spike that insulin. Now, people talk about insulin being like a negative thing when it spikes because of like the diabetic pandemic and all that kind of things. However, as an athlete, insulin is your friend, because what insulin does is it regulates blood sugar, but also it unlocks the muscles, which allows us to flush that glycogen, carbohydrates, into the muscles. Okay. Without the insulin, we can't do that. Okay. So let's imagine that our muscles are locked, and insulin is the key that unlocks them. That's all it is. So post-workout, again, we want something simple that's going to spike your blood sugar. Yeah. That's going to allow us then to the insulin to flush it in.
Okay. And then when you're looking at your meal 2 hours after, you're looking at, let's say, the 15 minutes after a game, that you're looking for the recovery side of things. How, what are you looking at the same idea? Are you still looking at that type of
No, not really. So I'll give you an example for myself, or what some of my athletes may do. So I'm a big chocolate milk kind of guy. So we laugh about this on my podcast, because my post-workout straight away, 15 minutes after, and you'll see me in the gym, I'll drink chocolate milk, because it's basically a 4-to-1 carbohydrate to protein ratio. It's simple carbohydrates, and it's dairy protein, which is the best amino acid profile you can get. Yeah. So that is kind of like one thing out there. What a lot of my other athletes do, so Sam will do, they will have a banana and a protein shake. Okay. Because you're getting in your simple carbohydrates and you're getting in your protein. Okay. It's super simple. So if we're looking for simple answers to post-workout straight away, a piece of fruit and some protein, or something that combines the two, that's great. Now, 2 hours later, again, we're not in a rush now. We're not trying to, we've already spiked the insulin straight after. We're not in a rush now. So this meal can now be more complex. So it can be sweet potato and chicken, or brown rice, wholemeal rice, whatever you want, and chicken. Whatever carbohydrate source and protein source you want, as long as it's a good ratio, say a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio. And it doesn't have to be the simple carbohydrates. In fact, it's probably better that it's not. It's probably better that it's complex. So if we can imagine if we're looking at 4 prongs, we go complex, simple, simple, complex, with the workout being in the middle. Okay.
And then after that 2 hour mark, let's say your game is on a Sunday, it's at 4 o'clock on a Sunday, 2 hours after you're having dinner, so it's 6, and then what are you looking at between 6 and 10 before you go to bed?
Well, that's a great example, because you can probably use a Sunday roast as that 2 hour meal. Because you realistically think about all the vegetables and the meat that we're getting in there. As long as you piling your plate up with the vegetables and meat, and we're looking at a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio, that's probably the perfect meal 2 hours later. So the guys listening at home, that's ideal. Then what we need to do is we need to think about so say that it's 6 o'clock, we're looking at 8 o'clock before we go to bed or something like that. Yeah. We need to make sure now that these numbers now are what's left over from our total daily energy expenditure. So your total calories throughout the day are still super important. So what we do is we look at our sporting nutrition, our pre and post workout, and then whatever's left, that's where we're hitting in there.
Okay. So that's going to be individual then to...
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of research out there that shows casein protein is harder to digest, so having it throughout the night, last thing at night, may be ideal. I don't think people need to get particularly caught up in that. I'm 100% sure that if you're hitting your protein targets for the day, that you don't need to particularly worry about that. I'd more worry about the fact that they're coming from quality protein sources with that are high up on the PCDAA scale, which means that they're full of amino acids.
What examples?
Well, dairy's the best by far. And then obviously if you're a vegan or plant-based dieter, soy is quite high on that as well. And then obviously beef, chicken, I think beef is 0.92. Okay. And I think dairy's 1.
Oh, really? Okay.
So dairy's obviously the gold standard of amino acids, but that's because obviously it's produced for the young to grow up. Yeah. To get everything they need.
Okay, I didn't realize that. And then the likes of eggs and stuff like that, where are they on that list?
Yeah, still
pretty high. Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so first off, I actually want to clear up something because you obviously, a lot of people know now, but some people will be still kind of worried. There's no issue with eating later in the day with like when you're looking at body comp or anything like that. There's no.
No, I'm so glad you brought that up because for years, and in fact, when I did my first nutrition qualification, which was, I'm not going to tell you how long ago because I don't want to give my age away, but we were even taught then to eat every 2.5 hours to keep your metabolism going, to make sure you don't eat after 7 o'clock because whatever you don't utilize, your body's going to store as fat, and that's just been proven just to be absolutely wrong. The most important thing for body composition nutrition is that we are sticking around our daily goals. Wherever you get them, you can eat them all in one meal if you want. It makes no odds. But then for sporting performance, this is where the nutrition timing comes in. We would never do that for sporting performance because we're timing our carbohydrates and our proteins around our workouts.
Yeah, okay. And I guess to follow up to that, you were just saying before this that you put out a newsletter last week on why breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. Why is that?
Yeah, so I do feel like it's a great marketing campaign by maybe Kellogg's or whoever it's been putting in that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but it's 100% not. The most important meal of the day is definitely your post-workout meal.
Okay.
Like 100%, because we're trying to gauge, as Robbie will tell you, he's the man for all this, that recovery is probably one of the most important things in the world.
Yeah.
Like you can do the best session in the world, but if you don't recover from it, you're not going to get the benefits from it, but also you're not going to be able to go again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which are two negative things.
Yeah. You're breaking down in the long run. You're breaking down. So, so with that, I guess then you're saying that once you're getting everything right and once everything is consistent throughout the day and consistent throughout your week and month, I guess that it doesn't really make a difference which meal is coming in at which time, does it?
No, as long as your post-workout meal and your pre-workout meal, yeah. Yeah, so I'm not sure for some of your athletes if they're trying to do like adaptive training or something. So maybe when you're doing adaptive training, you're trying to push back your lactate threshold or push back your VO2 max or that kind of thing, or even push back your energy systems. So obviously, as we know that your energy systems, you can oxidize fat at anything more than 75% of your VO2 max, which means that we need to take carbohydrates on to fuel our workouts or our training sessions. But you can be adapted to that to mean that you can maybe do fasted training. And what fasted training will do is that will push back that 75%, i.e. you're still only going to be working at 75%, but 75% is going to be a little bit higher, which means you can spare carbohydrates for when they're needed.
Okay. And to break that down for an idiot like myself, what does that mean in simple terms?
So all that means basically is that when we start to work a little bit harder than when we can talk, so imagine that when you can jog and you can still talk in, let's say that's going to still be, our body's still going to be able to fuel that with fat oxidation, i.e. it's fat stores. The second that it becomes harder to talk, so we can only speak like one-word answers, our body's going to be turning over and thinking, I need carbohydrates now to oxidize this, to fuel this, because I can no longer do it by fat.
Okay.
So that's
the easy way. Okay, that's good. Perfect. Okay. So to move on to the next one, I think the next question then what we got in was key nutritional tips for vegan and vegetarian diets. Now I know the two diets are very different, so if you want to go into that whatever way you want, whatever way is you're most comfortable going about it, but key nutritional tips for that population.
Yeah, so the way that we kind of look at in research methods more recently is plant-based. Okay. So we'll use the term plant-based more than we will like vegetarian or vegan or that kind of thing. So plant-based dieters, there is no whatsoever reason why a plant-based dieter can't reach the same goals as a carnivorous athlete, but it's just a little bit harder. And I know people might not enjoy me saying that, but it is just a little bit harder because obviously, as we spoke about before, the quality of where you get your protein sources from is super important. Maybe not for the average member of the public, but for athletes, it is important. Now, obviously, if we're talking about like the majority of the top sources of amino acid profiling in proteins comes from non-plant-based diets, so like from meat or from dairy. Now, that doesn't mean we can't take an amino acid supplement. Okay. Like just supplement with it. If we feel like we're only getting our proteins from plant-based sources and we're missing out on getting the key amino acids that we would get from dairy or from meat, you can just supplement that into your diet. Okay. 100%. And that's not really going to make too much of a difference. We still need to. So the main consideration that I say to my athletes who are plant-based is that make sure our quality of protein sources are good enough that if we feel like we're not hitting that quality, just supplement.
Oh yeah.
That's all. Because that's what supplements are. They're there to supplement our diet.
And what type of supplements would you be looking at for a vegan or vegetarian?
Well, it would just be, there's a few different things actually, what we need to really talk about here. So just amino acids in general. So you can just supplement them as amino acids. Now, if you're hitting your protein targets and your protein's coming from a good source, i.e. high up on the PCDA scale, you do not need amino acid supplements. However, if you're a plant-based diet who's not hitting quality protein sources, they then become very important and a great tool. Secondly, obviously creatine. You cannot, if you're a strength athlete and you are not taking on fish or meat, you are not getting any creatine in your diet whatsoever, pretty much. I think blueberries, maybe cranberries, maybe have a tiny little bit, but it's minuscule. So you need to supplement with creatine because you're not getting any in your diet. And obviously then iron. So iron's super important because there's two different types of iron. There's heme and non-heme. Heme absorbs about 17% of what we take on. Our body can absorb about 17%, but they all come from animal sources. Yeah. Now non-heme comes from plant-based sources, but our body can only absorb about 2% of it.
Okay.
So although there are sources of iron out there and companies will promote, yes, it's plant-based and a great source of iron. However, if it's non-heme source, our body's only going to absorb 2% of what it is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we need to then supplement with iron if you're a plant-based dieter, yeah.
Okay.
Especially if you're a woman plant-based dieter, because obviously women tend to have a lot of iron deficiencies due to the menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
So if you're a woman plant-based dieter, in the time of your life where you experience a menstrual cycle, iron should be top of your supplements.
Okay, and is there any way how would you know, is there any physical signs that you know they come through? Yeah,
so the problem with like physical signs, as I'm sure that you will tell all your clients, is that prevention is the best cure. So let's take it. You're not going to get any negative from taking any. Okay. You can't take too much. So if you just put in some iron supplements every morning, one iron tablet every morning, you ain't going to get any negative side effects. However, the problem with the side effects of iron deficiency are that it's very similar to something called RED-S, so reduced energy syndrome.
Okay.
So what happens then is it's like that can happen to our athletes as well who aren't fueling themselves enough. So if you have an athlete who isn't fueling themselves enough, RED-S is something that will happen then. So it's stress fractures, decrease in mood, it's a lot of injuries, losing weight, hair falling out, stopping your menstrual cycle. All those are like side effects of RED-S, and the side effects of iron deficiency are very similar to those as well. So it's really tough with an athlete to decide which one's which. So if you're an athlete out there and you're working hard and you're maybe, even if you're a plant-based diet or not, iron supplements are definitely something. Most good multivitamins will have them in. Okay, good to know. And does that, let's say, because this lady in particular is an endurance runner, she runs in between 5k and then like she runs 800 as well on track and stuff like that. Does that make a difference then? Would you say now, knowing that you would have to change the type of diet you have, or is it kind of the same principles apply? No, I would say that personally, I think something that's big in the industry is talking about like the kind of negativities of a plant-based diet. But I don't think that really nowadays with supplementation there is any negativity. I think if anything, it's super easy to hit your carbohydrates goals because you're eating a lot of fruit and veg, so that's super easy. And your protein goals, there's a lot of things out there. I would stay away from obviously processed protein, that Beyond Burgers and all those kind of stuff. They're just absolute load of rubbish. Like just the amount of chemicals and preservatives in them is just dangerous. But yeah, so no, I think that nowadays is a great time to be plant-based if you want to be plant-based, and as long as you are just understanding that unfortunately, whether it's for ethical reasons or not, you have to understand that the primary quality protein sources still do come from animal products. So as long as we accept that and we know that and we work to supplement with, say, amino acids and then say iron and creatine, etc. on top of that, because we're not getting that in our diet, then there's no problem with being plant-based in the slightest.
All right, okay, good to know. Okay, so going on to the next one then. We were looking at thoughts on beta-aniline supplementation.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so basically all beta-aniline does is a buffer. To make it super simple, carnosine is in the muscle, which is used to then aid in hydrogen and iron buffering capabilities when lactic acid starts to take over and starts to cause fatigue. Now, there's a few different principles behind this. Is that under 60 seconds, our hydrogen ions that are in our muscles are not formed anywhere near or not accumulated anywhere near to any strength. So it's for any sport or any effort under 60 seconds, it's not going to make a difference. The peak is about 4 minutes. So at 4 minutes is when the accumulation of hydrogen ions in our muscle is peaked, and then obviously, if we can have beta-alanine in our system then as well, that's just going to help aid. Then the carnosine in there is going to form and it's going to buffer the lactic acid. And the lactic acid then is obviously, the more we can buffer that, the more we can buffer the negative effects of that, the longer we can work for. There's two different, the last study I read on this was a meta-analysis on 15 papers. Now there's two different ways we can take beta-alanine. So the first time is like as a single dose. So when you're looking at as a single dose of beta-alanine, the results showed over 15 studies that it was a 3% increase in sport performance. Okay. Which I think, if you're an athlete, 3% is not a bad thing. Now, there's a few different principles behind this as well. We need to look at what sports are going to use the glycolic anaerobic system, which is what we're talking about here, like from 60 seconds to 4 minutes, 60 seconds to 6 minutes, those kind of things. So, like, you know, the what's the sports back home?
I was going to say, this guy in particular is a rugby player.
Right, okay, so perfect. So rugby, yeah, so we're going to have loads and loads of intervals in there where for, say, 3 or 4 minutes, we're going to have to be working hard. Yeah. So if you're working hard for 3 or 4 minutes, then yes, it's going to help buffer. So then the secondary parts of this is then what the last 2 studies that I read showed was that if you are almost loading up, taking beta-alanine every day for a month, then the benefits can be between 10 and 13%. Oh, right, so if we're not just taking it as a one single dose, we're actually taking it as something that, as a supplement, as a daily supplement, it can have some really good benefits there as well. So the sports so you said the lady before who was an 800 metre runner?
Yeah, between 800 and she runs 5k across.
So she's probably going to benefit massively from beta-alanine. Yeah, because obviously if you're running 800 metres, we're past the 60-second mark. Yeah, unless she's like the best that's ever been in the world. but yeah, so anything past the 60 seconds, but anything past the 60-second mark, but we're still giving what we feel like is almost maximal effort. Yeah, okay. It's going to help then buffer the lactic acid in our muscles, which is going to make us be able to go between 3% and 12%, 13% better, depending on what your strategy and dosing strategy is. Okay, and yeah, I was going to ask after that, I actually don't take, the only supplements I take would be creatine. That's the only thing I supplement with. So beta-aniline, like what is that? That's not pre-workout, no? No, it's in pre-workout, does it? A lot of pre-workouts will have it in for that exact reason. Okay. For the exact reason is there, and you maybe get the little tingly sensation. You know, when you take a pre-workout, you get a little tingly sensation. That would be from the beta-alanine there as well. But most pre-workouts will have the beta-alanine. They'll have like a vasodilator as well, something that increases blood flow, and they'll have a stimulant, maybe probably caffeine. Okay. Well.
And going back to the sports the papers that you were reading there, when they said there was an improvement in sports performance, what were they looking at?
It's mainly time trialing, so it's either running or cycling. So the one that we were a part of in MMU when we did our study on beta-alanine, we did a time trial. But we did a single session time trial done in the same day, which was really, really tough because you do 2 4-kilometre time trials with like a 2-hour break in between. Okay. So that was really tough. But yeah, so it's basically time trialing because obviously with research methods, it's making the results look easier to digest on paper. So when it's a time trial and you've got somebody doing a 4K time trial on a bike, say, you know whether they did it faster or slower. Yeah. Because they're going all out for 4K. It's not like, we're working at an RP of 7 for 4 minutes. Where did we get to? It's basically how fast can you do this for? Then it's easy to compare against. Yeah. So time trialing. But honestly, like anything where you feel like you work for up to 10 minutes of hard work throughout the period of time, where it feels like that is you're working near maximal for up to 10 minutes, then it's going to be somewhat beneficial. Again, there's no negative side effects to it known. Maybe some gut distress. So obviously would never try it for the first time ever on game day. You would always try training, but it's the same as every supplement, and just find your tolerance. Okay, and what's the average dosage of it? This is really tough because the actual studies show that the dosage is like 100 grams, but that's of actual pure beta-alanine, not what you buy from the stock. from the shops. So I think it was 136 grams on the last paper I read on that 15, on the meta-analysis of 15 papers. But it will just be a serving size from the thing. Yeah, I would presume that serving size is probably between 2 and 5 grams of whatever the raw materials you're taking. And that will have the beta-alanine you need.
Okay, so sorry, did you say it was 100 grams?
Yeah, it's 136 grams on the 136 micrograms.
Micrograms.
Yeah. So if we're looking at a 2 gram serving of like raw of your supplement, we're hoping that 1.36 micrograms, so 136 micrograms. So it's like 75% of that powder is going to be beta-alanine.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Did I say grams?
Yeah.
It's micrograms. Yeah.
You may have said micrograms, but I could have picked it up wrong.
Yeah.
The second part of that question now, and just to clear it up, because I said I'd ask it, you were saying allowances for personal preferences, if the preferences don't prevail with science, but the science seems to say that it is.
Well, this is the problem, is that whenever supplement companies nowadays bring out so much stuff that you just don't know what to trust them. You just don't know how to trust them. So you need to really go and do your own research. You need to get on PubMed or ResearchGate and stuff like that and actually see what the literature says, because there's probably papers out there that show that beta-alanine doesn't work.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more papers out there that show that it does. Yeah. It's the same with creatine. Like, obviously, we all know that creatine works. We all know that it does work. But there's still be papers out there that show that it doesn't.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. And then looking at companies, any ones that you would have seen?
I always, this is not like a shameless plug or anything, but I always use my protein back home just because it's cheap and good quality. Okay. Like gold standard might be Optimum Nutrition, but you are paying a lot more than what you pay for my protein. To be honest, it's probably very similar. In fact, I wouldn't even say that it's any better. I'd just say maybe the packaging might be a bit better, or they have better sponsored athletes or something. I don't know, but my protein is what I always use for I use it and my athletes use it.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. So the next one then. Now I know some of these are going to cross over, so you don't have to go into the same amount of detail, but it's actually an interesting one at the back of this. It was what to eat post long event, and now this lady in particular does stuff like 48 hours, 24, 48 hours. She said, I'm fine enjoying the event, but find it very hard to satisfy my hunger post a 24 or 48 hour event and end up eating anything and everything. That's the first part. And then she said thoughts on supplements for that type of performance as well, which ones are most recommended. And I'll get on to the last bit then. It's about mango.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. So I think it's interesting how you said that you are fine intra-workout, but then struggle post-workout. To me, that would scream out with the facts where maybe we're not quite fine into workout, because as soon as we're finishing, then we're hitting the wall and our blood sugar. What happens when your blood sugar drops is, we'll have all experienced it. When your blood sugar drops super low, you become starving and ravenous, and you'll just eat anything in sight. So my first thing then, if it's one of my athletes, would be, can we just slightly up our intra-workout a little bit, keep that blood sugar higher, keep that muscle glycogen, or keep that blood glucose at least higher during it. And then I would also say that if you've just finished a 48-hour race, you can eat pretty much anything you want and you're going to be fine, as long as it's not fat. Now, fat is going to be 9 calories per gram, which means it's twice the density, which means it's twice as hard for our bodies to digest or use. So this is why we don't have fat post-workout at all, because we're not trying to do that. We're trying to aid in recovery, aid in stuff that's to digest, get a kickstart on it. So all my fat for my clients will come around the later on meals or the earlier on meals, not around the training meals.
Okay, and what would be examples that you would have seen in the past, people taking on heavy fat?
Peanut butter.
Oh, really?
People put peanut butter in post-workout shakes, and I just don't understand it. I just can't get my head around why on earth you would put a peanut butter in protein in a post-workout shake when we're trying to spike our insulin with stuff that's to shuttle muscle glycogen into muscles as quick as possible, and then to add protein to get in quick start on muscle protein synthesis. Why are we putting fat in there, something that's going to be just harder for our body to digest? It just doesn't make sense. Okay. Same with avocado. When you see people eating scrambled eggs and avocado on toast post-workout, and it's like, okay.
You're speaking to the population here, a lot of them, I'm sure. And I'm guilty of that myself. Both of those actually. So I kind of want to just zoom in on that a small bit more. If you're taking heavy fats post-workout, it's slow in recovery because it's taken so long to digest.
It's just slowing everything down, yeah? It's just slowing digestion down, just in general. Okay. And obviously we can't do anything without digestion. And if you're mixing all your foods together, your body's going to digest it all together, and then once it's all digested, it's going to utilize the individual components.
Yeah.
Now, if we're putting something there that's harder to digest, it's just going to slow it down.
Okay.
Which is,
Yeah.
it's super simple when you kind of break it down like that, when we're trying to do it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of avocado on toast as much as everyone, and I'm a fan of peanut butter, but it's just that those 2 meals pre and post,
Yeah.
just leave them out of that.
But you can, let's say in the morning, it's beneficial in the morning and the evening time, way before the race.
Even as far to go as the meal that's 2 hours either side,
Yeah.
it's probably okay then.
Okay.
Yeah, so in fact, it's definitely okay then. But we're just talking about those meals that are 15 minutes either side, where we're just trying to quickly attack things. That's not what we need then. But the meals that are 2 hours either side, then it's fine. We're just talking about really post.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, we're talking about optimal here as well in a lot of situations.
I mean, the thing about sports nutrition, what people get really, really frustrated with is that, and maybe even the way that I talk a lot of things, is we're talking here about getting the 5-10% benefit. And for the average member of the public, they don't need 5-10% benefit. What they need to do is they need to either be in a calorie deficit, hit the protein targets, and make sure they hit enough micronutrients to change their body composition. We're not talking about these people here now. We're talking about people who want to improve in their sport. And a 5 or 10% improvement in sporting terms when you competitive at sport is massive.
Yeah, geez, yeah, it's huge. Especially at the level that some of these are playing as well, is that a lot of them are playing like even up to a professional level, and those little changes make a big difference, especially in the long run, consistently in every training session at the end of the year. That's massive. Yeah,
well, we're not talking about like 5%. We're not talking about, if you have one post-workout meal perfect in the week, you're going to be 5% better next game. We're talking about like over 2 or 3 months. If you're doing things perfect for 2 or 3 months, you're going to start to see like a 5% increase maybe then.
Yeah, okay, that's good to clear up actually, that as well. Now, the second part was thoughts on supplements for these type of events. Is there anything else that you have to look at extra, the main things that you would talk about when you're looking at such ultra endurance?
Well, something we spoke about privately is hydration. And the hydration tablets for me are invaluable with my athletes, because it's like, I think it's 7 times more hydration than what a pint of water gives you if you put one of the tablets in.
Okay.
So obviously, people get super scared of sodium because of salt, because of the government kind of pushing down these guidelines in the face. But for athletes, sodium is your friend.
Yeah.
So, whenever we're sweating out, whenever we're sweating, we're coming dehydrated and stuff, we need to replenish sodium. So something like that, intra workout, post workout, is going to be great. Something hydration based with sodium, a bit of sugar, and obviously water.
Yeah.
And then obviously what we need to talk about then is intra workout. The key for the ultra, if we're doing something past 40 minutes, the key to intra workout is your balance between fructose and glucose. So fructose and glucose are similar in terms of they will do the same thing in the bloodstream, and they will basically do the same things in the bloodstream, but our body can digest fructose slightly quicker. It can utilize it slightly quicker, but we don't want it to all be fructose. So we want it to be about 60-40. It's like 60% fructose, 40% glucose. So most of the energy drinks out there nowadays are really good, and they will be about that. If you actually look at the kind of the label, we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is something that everyone kind of knows in the industry. So intra workout, we're trying to make sure that if it's more than 40 minutes, we're trying to get 60 to 40 fructose to glucose. Now, supplements post workout to this is just based around hydration and recovery. Would I ever advise any of my clients to take like a mass gainer? No. You don't need to. Like, if you're somebody who really struggles with eating food, then maybe making like a protein, like utilizing protein powder is great. I will utilize protein powder in a protein shake or in my porridge or something like that, but I'm not somebody who would sit there and have a protein shake unless post-workout I really didn't feel like eating. Then I will have my chocolate milk, but but it may be a protein shake then as well. So, I think for these ultra athletes, supplements is not, it's just what we spoke about before. Are you getting enough iron in your gut, and are we getting enough multivitamins, magnesium, potassium, all those kind of things? So let's pretend that you're really, really good at your sports nutrition, your nutrition's on point. If you're having a multivitamin in the morning, and then we're hitting our calories and micronutrients and macronutrient goals throughout the day, then we don't really need anything.
Okay.
To me, this athlete sounds like I'd like to just focus slightly more on the intra workout, the drawing phase.
Yeah.
And then when the blood sugar drops, when we finished and the adrenaline's gone, we hopefully won't get that ravenous, I need to eat everything. Because all that's happening is your adrenaline's going throughout the race, and then as soon as that stops, your blood sugar's dropped, and you're like, oh my God, give me any food and give me anything.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then the last part was on mango. It's supposed to be this new superfood for endurance. Have you read anything on it? Have you heard anything about it?
When you told me that this morning, it's the first I've ever heard of it. I mean, again, we speak about like any fruit being fructose being quicker to digest, slightly quicker to digest than glucose. So yeah, I don't. It's the first. No, I mean, for me, my athletes take on if they're going to eat intra-workoutly, watermelon's the one that they choose to eat, just because of the fact of the hydration, the amount of water that's in watermelon, and the fact that it's fructose.
Yeah, it's so good as well.
Yeah.
My God. Okay, perfect. You mentioned blueberries a minute ago.
Yeah, I think it was more cranberries than blueberries, but all berries. It was talking about creatine sources, so plant-based sources of creatine. Okay. So cranberries and blueberries. I think it's more cranberries than blueberries, to be honest. But but it's kind of nominal in the point of that. If that's your only source of creatine, but you're a strength athlete, you really need to be supplementing creatine.
Okay. And then there is it's kind of a change, but you have like beetroot, nitric oxide, stuff like that. Have you looked into that side of things much? Yeah.
So beetroot juice is just like nitric oxide, basically a vasodilator. So it's increasing blood flow. So I don't know if any of your guys out there used to go be a bit like broy in the gym and take like a pre-workout that they would feel like super pumped on.
Yeah.
That's all that's doing. So it's just basically just a vasodilator, increasing blood flow to muscles. Same with beetroot.
Okay.
Beetroot juice is the same kind of thing. One of my good friends, Joe Fox, who's on the Olympic Trinidad and Tobago gymnastics team, he did his master's degree with us, and he did it on the effects of beetroot juice on performance. And I think that was the same kind of thing. We can flow more blood into an area, we can flow more blood into a muscle, which means we can probably perform slightly better with that area.
Okay. So it'd be something that, would you do it just before a race, or is it something that you'd be drinking beetroot juice every day?
I wouldn't. For me personally, it's not something I would take. However, if you are somebody who's trying to really push the barriers of that kind of like performance, then muscles may. Again, if you're talking about a race like running, I would be very wary of it.
Okay.
It's not something that I would take for running. I would be very, very concerned with maybe slightly blood pooling or something, in the calves or something like that.
Oh, really?
But flowing a bit too much blood in there, possibly. It was something that you maybe could try. Again, each individual's different, but it's not something that I would prescribe for one of my athletes.
Okay, good, yeah. Perfect. There is two more. What I'll do is, because the last one is kind of similar to what some of the stuff we talked about before, so it's on nutrition timing, so I'll come back to that. But would love to hear about nutrition for inflammation and flare-ups, and then what to eat after long sessions to help with fatigue. But in general, we've covered that last bit, so really looking at inflammation and flare-ups. What's your knowledge on that?
Okay, so inflammation and dietary inflammation is super, super tough to talk about because it's super individualized for whoever you are. Like different people have different foods that make them inflamed. Now, a lot of the research out there does show that a ketogenic diet is good for inflammatory diseases because the carbohydrates and the sugar in the blood can aid in stopping the inflammation. However, when we're looking at sporting performance, the ketogenic diet is not something we want to be doing. I mean, especially if you're somebody who never really gets past 75% of your VO2 max, i.e. you're like a super, super endurance runner, then maybe we can play around with carbohydrates a little bit there. But for the majority of like good athletes, then ketogenic diet is not something we want to be playing around with. But it's decent for, the research shows that it's good for inflammatory diseases. So what I would advise there is if you can just make a food diary just for a week, and just make a food diary and then see when you feel at your most inflamed, see what it is that's causing you, because it could just be something in your diet that's causing you some inflammatory. I think that's probably going to be the best. And then obviously if the problem did persist, it might be where on non-training days we could look at taking carbohydrates out or something like that, to try and reduce inflammation that way. Again, it's such a hard question because it's so individualized to the person, what's causing them the inflammation, and B, what sport they do and how serious they are about the sport, i.e. would you trade off some of your performance in the sport to get rid of some of the inflammation?
Yeah, okay. Perfect. And then, see, when I know with this lady in particular, when you're talking about flare-ups, especially from my perspective, flare-ups, we're looking at like an injury flare-up, okay? So there's a lot more contributing to an injury flare-up than inflammation and diet. A lot of the time it's fatigue, it's built up of fatigue over a long period, which can be affected by anything. Obviously sleep and all that has a huge role in that.
Yeah, so the research out there when we're talking about like keto being good for, say, anti-inflammatory, for like inflammatory diseases, we're talking about diseases here, we're not talking about like acute injuries.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about like say an injury pattern, I'm not quite sure that nutritionally changing anything is going to really affect that, the inflammation on the injury pattern. I would presume that you're probably the best guy to speak to about sorting out that before we look at other things.
From the sounds of it, like looking at that, basically what I would be saying is everything that you've said, like, is on point in terms of getting your nutrition right and fueling before and after performance, all that. That's completely your game, and that is going to help massively with minimizing the amount of fatigue you have after. But when you're looking at injury flare-ups, you have to manage fatigue, and there's a lot more contributing to fatigue, I suppose, is kind of what I'm getting at with that. And people don't really understand it, like sleep. It can be your environment, the people that you meet, are they drawing a lot of energy out of you, stuff like that really contributes to it. So it works both ways, but obviously if your nutrition is shite, your fatigue is going to be.
Yeah, I think probably we're probably looking at more like nutrition being like a secondary or tertiary effect of that rather than actually like the primary cause.
Yeah, okay. And actually interesting one just off the top of my head here, what's like changing your nutrition after injury, like let's say an acute injury, a hamstring tear. Is there anything on that, or have you?
I've honestly, I've never read anything about any benefit. I've never even read a study like looking at that.
Yeah. And
I would presume that we don't, in our industry, because obviously everybody's trying to like be this next knees over toes guy or whatever, trying to be the next person who gets 1 million followers. Everyone's always trying to throw out this new like radical ideas. And realistically, the basics are the basics for a reason. The basics are they're the best thing to do. So if your performance nutrition is on point and then you have a hamstring tear, why would you not go back to it being on point again?
Yeah.
It's just like the basics are the basics. Let's stick to the basics and let's make sure they're perfect. And then once we've got them perfect, then we look at supplementation, then we look at other things after that. Okay, perfect. Good. And the last one, last question that we got sent in, and it's kind of something that we covered at the start and throughout the podcast, so I just want to, I guess, more of a refresher. Nutrition timing, what aids best at performance in the gym and then on the pitch, and what this guy's talking about is on the pitch as a football player and playing at a fairly high level. So any extra tips, or is it kind of you're running back over the basics of the 2 hours? Yeah, let's just recap it. So we'll just recap it so the guys at home, if you're still with us, hopefully. Whether it be training or a game, let's take being optimal all the time. Okay, so every training session, let's be optimal for those training sessions, the same as what we would be for a game. I.e., we don't change things on game day because we want our body to like routine. Our body likes knowing what's coming. We like knowing how our body reacts to things, and we don't want to throw like a spanner in the works. So let's be optimal, whether it be training or a game, and let's look at 2 hours before. Are we topping up our glycogen, our muscle glycogen, from the sleeping the night before? 15 minutes before, are we throwing in some simple carbohydrates to spike our insulin levels, to unlock the muscles, to regulate our blood sugar, to unlock the muscles, to flow it in? During, are we going over 40 minutes, which means are we getting a 60 to 40 ratio of carbohydrates, i.e. fructose and glucose? 15 minutes after, are we having a 3 or 4 to 1 ratio of carbohydrates to proteins with a high quality source of protein and more simple carbohydrate? 2 hours after that, are we fueling up, i.e. getting, again, 2, 3, 4 to 1 ratio of carbohydrates to proteins, but with a more complex carbohydrate and, again, a high quality source of protein? Perfect.
One actually that popped into my head, and we talked about it downstairs, was carb loading before a endurance event, particularly a marathon.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between carb loading between a marathon and, let's say, if you have a football match, something like that? How does that?
Yeah, definitely. So the thing with our bodies are that the research out there shows that we can maybe store between 300 and 600 grams of carbohydrates in our body. So for football, say we're going for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
We aren't going to use more than 600 grams of carbohydrates to fuel that game. Okay, so what will happen then is, do we need to eat carb? Right, let's make this super basic, okay? So all we do when we carbohydrate load is we make sure that our carbohydrates, that our muscle glycogen's full. That's all we're doing. So imagine that we're a car. To make it super simple, guys, imagine we're a car. All we're doing with carbohydrates is we're putting petrol in and we are filling it up. So the night before a game or the day before a race or whenever, we're filling up to make sure that we are brimmed. Our fuel tank is full. When we sleep throughout the night, our bodies need to stay alive. So it's going to use some of that energy just to stay alive. Then all we're doing before the game, before the competition, is we're just trying to make sure we're filling that fuel up so that when we start the game, we are full.
Yeah.
During the game, all we're doing is the same thing. Whatever at half time, whatever we've done, whatever we've utilised throughout the first half, we're just trying to fill up again. That's all sports nutrition is we're trying to make sure we are getting through that game, that race, with our energy systems on full, allowing us then to use intra workout nutrition to just slowly top it up as we're going.
Okay. Oh yeah, simple enough. So like if you were carb loading before the game, before a marathon, you do it like the 24 hours before, but you'd have to make sure that your nutrition is simple throughout the week. It's not essential if your nutrition is simple.
Yeah, well, it's consistent,
I should say.
Consistency is the key here. If your nutrition is on point for your training and for your recovery all the way through the pre-season or before the race or whatever, then realistically our muscle glycogen should be pretty full all the time anyway.
Yeah.
So we don't need to then spake a week. It's such old-fashioned to think we need to eat pasta for a week the week before. All you're going to do is you're going to spill out, and your body's not going to be able to deal with all those carbohydrates, and you're probably going to store some as fat. And we're going to retain a hell of a lot of water because, as we know, depending on which papers you read, between 2.7 and 4 grams of water is retained for every 1 gram of carbohydrate that we eat, or can be retained, shall we say. So yeah, if your nutrition is, if you're following these basic principles that we're talking about, i.e. your calories and your macronutrients are on point throughout the day, based around your TDE, your total daily energy expenditure, which met scales include your workouts and your training sessions, and then we are hitting these targets either side of our workouts, your muscle glycogen should be pretty full anyway. So maybe, are we going to increase our carbohydrates the day before slightly? Yeah. Maybe in a day, but we're not talking about loads. Maybe another 1.5 times, if that.
Okay.
We're not talking about loads. We spoke a little bit just downstairs about, obviously the pancreas is excreting insulin, and whenever we put that under too much stress for a prolonged amount of time, athletes are slightly different, luckily, because obviously we're utilising the carbohydrates we're putting in. But if you're a non-athlete and you are putting your pancreas under extreme pressure, i.e. to excrete a lot of insulin for a prolonged amount of time, it's just going to quit and you're going to become diabetic very quickly. Okay,
perfect. That's excellent, Mike. Thanks a million. I'll leave you on that for now because you answered everything there in serious detail and more, and we covered everything that I wanted to cover, and a lot more. So first off, thanks a million for coming on. I really appreciate that. You're a wealth of knowledge, especially in that performance nutrition space, and I think that a lot of people should definitely check out the podcast, check out the newsletter as well. I know you started doing that more recently, and check you out on Instagram at Mike Nico. Do you have anything else to finish off with there?
No, hope you all found it interesting, and like Robbie says, if you want to come and check out anything else, just give me a shout. If you've got any questions and we'll have a chat.
Yeah, perfect. And I'll finish with saying, we talked about it downstairs, is that you are taking on people for consultations?
Yep.
More now then. Okay, so if anyone's interested in that, guys, definitely reach out to him at Mike Nico, so MICHO.
MIKENICHO.
Yeah, Jesus.
There you go.
But that's everything from us today, guys. Thanks a million for listening, and I will chat to you all again soon. So have a good one.
See you later, guys.